So we are back with you today to talk a little bit more about a how-to type of podcast today. We're going to talk a little bit about how to make a connection.
Yep.
I think how you know you've made a connection is if that person remembers you. You had a moment with that individual that they remember. And when you start talking about people and dynamics and first impressions and relationship building, it's obviously a complex conversation because we're all very different personality types.
Yeah.
We easily can divide into extrovert versus introvert. And I know whenever we do any of those types of profiles, I tend to pop up more of an introvert. You tend to pop up more of an extrovert. However, I realize that anybody that knows us well would agree with those comments, but also knows that there are times that you can be more introverted and times that I can be more extroverted. Typically, I think that what that really is referring to is does not mean that because you're an introvert you have terrible people skills, or because you're an extrovert you have great people skills. That's not a true statement.
No.
What it actually means is, as an introvert, you are more energized by being alone. That's how you rejuvenate. An extrovert is energized and rejuvenated by being around people. It's not bad or good. It just simply is who we are. Right? But I know for me, as I've read about myself, as I take tests, sometimes I think I can come off maybe a little more quiet or mysterious to some people who don't know me well. But I like to have meaningful conversations with people. It tends to be how I do make a connection. But I have to work at, in the beginning, not coming across too quiet or mysterious. Where I feel like you are more memorable naturally because you're more funny. And you are more extroverted. It's easier for you to put yourself out there and make a connection with someone more easily. But today we're going to talk about, regardless of what your personality type, your natural propensities are, we're just going to give you a few tips that might help you learn how to make a connection better as you're talking to people and out there, either building your business or even just in your family, how to make a connection with those that you love the most. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today.
Well, and so first of all, the easiest way to make a connection, or one great way to make a connection, is really looking for the things that you have in common and not focusing on the differences. I feel like in our current world state, everybody's just really focused on the differences between us and not the common ground that we have with each other. One of the things that I use as a way to find that common ground, oftentimes I meet people with unique first names, meaning they may be spelled one way but pronounced a totally different way. My name is like that. That's how I connect with them. And so I try to make sure I've got their name right. I tell them, and I say this, but I go by Fitz because my last name is Fitzgerald. It's a nickname. Nobody actually named me Fitzgerald. But my first name is spelled like Alex, but it's pronounced Ellick. It's an old family name. It's been passed down several times. I was blessed with it as a first name, and people called me Alex for so long. I kept having to correct them, and then I changed my name to Fitz, not legally, but just introducing myself, started calling myself Fitz, and then I find people call me Fritz, and I'm like, come on, you can't even get that right. But in meeting somebody new that has a unique name, I take the time to make sure I have their name right. Because one, it does make them feel special that I'm taking the time to make sure I got their name right. And it also helps me remember their name. So the next time I talk to them, I can say their name and say it correctly. But I'll also throw in a comment like, man, my name's jacked up too. I mean, us jacked up names, we got to stick together. Am I right? And it's always like, yeah, I'm right. And so it kind of drops the guard down a little bit and allows us to connect. And I've met so many different people with so many different unique names, but it's just one thing that we have in common. Now, not everybody's got a jacked up name like me. And so another thing that a common ground that I often find with people is military service. Now, here's an interesting thing. It's a common ground, but I wasn't in the military. A couple of years in ROTC in college, but, that's not military, let's face it. So I never bring that up because those in the real military go, yeah, it's not. But my brother was in the Army. My dad was in the Navy. And so depending on who I meet is what I'll talk about. If I'm meeting somebody who's in the Marines, I'll probably talk more about my brother who is in the Army because the Marines just typically have a disdain for the Navy. But if I meet somebody like in the Air Force or the Navy, I'll definitely talk about how my dad was on the carrier USS Forrestal and all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't even have to be something that I have in common with them, but by proxy, I've got it in common with them because of my brother and my dad. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be my experience. It's I know somebody with that same experience, and I'm finding that common ground.
Yeah, that's good. I think also just things like, where someone's from, location, their hobbies or activities, you can find common ground. I do feel like probably at this stage in our life, the most common ground I find with people is they have children because it seems like if it weren't for work, the other place that I'm meeting people the most or meeting new people are through my children because the parents of their friends. And that actually, I'm going to lead that into then our second kind of how-to point that we want to make is expressing genuine interest.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important that you ask people questions about their lives. For example, like if you know your friends have kids, it's great to ask about their kids. What are their kids interested in? What are their kids like? And people love to talk about their kids. And we'll go on and on and on about it. And honestly, I'm probably just as guilty about that. Like I can probably go on and on about it. I try to control that just because I don't want to bore people and I want to make a genuine connection. So I want to make sure that if I'm sharing about my children or my life, that I also then equally ask about their life or what's going on with their kids and find a way to make a connection by expressing genuine interest in the things that we do have in common or the things that maybe I don't even understand about their life that I want to understand better.
Another way of how to make, because I got nothing to add to that. It is the same with the kids, and there's a lot of overlap there. But another way of making a connection is seeking to understand rather than to be understood. I think in our world today, everybody wants to be heard, but it seems that few actually want to hear. Does that make sense? And it creates this dissonance. It creates this wedge between us that can only be resolved by seeking to understand. We've got lots of friends with varied backgrounds to us, right? I mean, just different, whether socioeconomically, racially, whatever. It's just different backgrounds, religiously, but. And you've challenged me in this, I believe, in listening to someone's story. Because they have a story, and their opinion on a current social matter is going to be based on experience that they've had, that I haven't necessarily had the same experience. And if I'm judging their opinion based on my experience, that's not fair to them, and it's never going to create a connection. Because I'm not seeking to understand. I'm seeking for them to understand me. I'm seeking to be understood. And that's a problem. When you can figure that out of, I want to understand where you're coming from. I want to hear what shaped that thought process. And many conversations I've had like that over the years, it totally turned how I saw something, my opinion about something, because I didn't take into consideration that. And now you've told me. And so not only did it make a connection, but it made me a more complete person, which in turn then makes me more capable of creating more connections with more people.
That's correct.
That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, too, as a recovering people pleaser,
that's you, not me.
No, I know me. I'm the recovering people pleaser, and I'm still in my, 21-day probably course or whatever. But
you're on step 2.
Yeah, this is where, though, sometimes out of fear, we don't clarify, we don't seek to understand because we're sort of afraid of the discomfort, they might not like me. We're afraid of that awkwardness by not really, or we're afraid of the confrontation. So we won't ask to try to understand them. But I agree with what you're saying. And when you seek to understand, it means that you're okay with being misunderstood. And that is a difficult place sometimes to be, particularly when you want everyone to like you.
Yeah.
But you're actually going to make a stronger impact or connection with that individual when you're willing to feel a little misunderstood in order to better understand them.
Yeah, totally. Last thing I'd say, and you may want to speak more on this, but another way of making a connection, another how-to, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but you're getting the idea. Another way is to just give more than you take. That's it's almost like a challenge to outserve the person that you're trying to connect with. And we've got friends that are like that for sure. I mean, it's not a competition, but man, I've got friends that I just feel like there's no chance I'm ever going to be able to give more to them than I've taken from them.
Right.
And it's like a personal challenge of what can I do to give more because they've given me so much, and I appreciate it. And they, by doing so, made a connection with me. And my fear in that is that I'm not doing it back and making a connection with them. Does that make sense? Because connection is two-way. If somebody could come out of a conversation and feel like, man, Heather is the best conversationalist, but they never asked one question about you, like they feel connected to you, but you don't feel connected to them, and so connection hasn't really happened if it's not two ways.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you forget somebody who gives to you.
No.
Whether it be, right, there's all kinds of ways you can give. I mean, little gifts, little handwritten notes. But right, in the emotional give and take of a relationship, there has to be, always, there is some give and take. But I know, like in my closest, more intimate relationships or friendships, there are times that, sure, I'm going through something and I hog the conversation to talk through what I'm going through. But I leave that moment and I'm aware of that. Yeah. I'm aware of the fact that that friend just gave me their time and energy. And I have a mental note that next time we're together to make sure that I allow them to talk about what's going on in their life. And I care because I want to know about their life. And it's not that it's a competition or that it's a game, and your closest friends should never look at it that way. But if you're not looking at relationships thinking, how can I give more than I take, you're probably not making a memorable connection with that individual.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting way of making connection that we're doing here, right? I mean, it's kind of one-sided. We're looking at a camera and
but
being
we are
recorded.
trying to give more than we take.
We are trying to give more than we take, but in order for us to connect, we also would like to hear from you.
That's right.
You know, we want to hear from you. If there's some topic that you say, man, I wish the Fitzgeralds would cover this.
Yes, or
Gosh,
something you're struggling with.
I tune every time just knowing they're going to talk about this and they're not. Please let us know.
Yes.
And it may be one of those things where, I don't know the answer to that. That's a really good question. I'm going to find something and tell you, or maybe it is something we've had experience with and we can help, because that's what we want to do. We want to make connection. That's how we started this in the first place. We just want to make connection with people who feel so isolated right now in the world. And in order to do that, we need to hear back from you. So feel free to shoot us emails, fitz@fitzgroup.org, heather@fitzgroup.org. Connect with our staff at thefitzgroup.org/staff calendars. Book a time. Let's talk. Drop us a text. If you got our cell phones, just drop us a call. Like let's connect. Let's talk. We want to give more than we're taking, and we want to serve you any way we can. Right?
That's right.
Okay. Hey, now that you know, you know.